Maxwell, thank you so much for joining me today and making the time. You are co-founder at Saltbox.
Correct.
To be honest, you have one of the most interesting co-founder profiles I've ever seen. And I wanna start our conversation over there.
Yeah,
Looking at your background, you are a true generalist.
correct. I am.
You were in consulting. You were at Bridgewater Associates in investment banking. You were at Full Story early on. And to be frank, you have one of the most interesting titles I've ever seen. Hugger, I want to dive deeper into that part. And for the last almost 5 years, one of the most successful startups that came out of Atlanta Techstars ecosystem, Saltbox. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background,
Sure.
what you have done and how it led to what you're doing today at Saltbox?
Yeah, happy to chat. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. My generalist background stems from, as a child, there was only one job I ever wanted. Was like I wanted to be president of the United States. I was a curious, sometimes hard to control child. And that definitely came to life in my 20s when I started my career. I wanted to learn so many things. And the flip side of that is sometimes I got bored quickly. And so I said, okay, well, bored is a mindset, so let me like invert it and just like lean into like, what is inspiring me? What do I want to go learn? How do I challenge myself? But then also, trying to figure out how things connect to each other. Things are more related to each other than you realize, but sometimes you just have to open up your purview a little bit and understand the patterns and understand the connections. I just followed a path that was in front of me from my early 20s and then try to learn as much as possible. And when I felt like, okay, my curiosity is scratched, then I want to move to something else where I want to be challenged. And the thing I learned through that immaturity a little bit was that what's really going to inspire me was understanding cultures and how things are built. And so after grad school, coming to Bridgewater, I spent, 2+ years understanding this combination of like, how do you actually like build things? And what does building things really mean? It's like having clear goals and outcomes, and then thinking about people and design, right? So the people, like, who are the people, and what do you have them? What do you want them to do to go ahead and accomplish your goals and meet those desired outcomes? Leaving was really about I wanted to actually try to go build something myself. Bridgewater was already established; it was a $160 billion firm at that time. I wanted to get closer to actually being able to build. So I had the privilege of joining Full Story very early on. And I joined as a hugger, as you called out, right? And
Tell us more about that. What does a hugger do at Full Story?
So Full Story had three core sort of words for its values. Bionics, right? Thinking about using technology to make humans more human. Clarity, is it very clear what we're trying to accomplish, and do we clearly communicate with each other? And then empathy. Right? Do we take the time to deeply understand and then put that understanding to use? Hugging in Full Story parlance was the most empathetic thing you can do to like in the physical world, right? Was to hug somebody. And so great, let's build a team called Huggers that were embodied empathy within Full Story, embodied empathy with our customer, embodied empathy with within our technology, just like sort of like we were empowered to be the empathy champions across Saltbox. And so my role was like very early stage. It was a combination of product management, user research, customer success and customer support, account management, doing listening tours, building community, all the things that helped us connect with and understand who our customer was, and then embody that and bring that into the DNA of Full Story. And it was just the most empowering role. And really from there, I got to understand what is it like to take an idea, validate it with the customer, sort of build something, go back to the customer and say, is this solving your problem? And if it's not, how do I diagnose why it's not? And then continue to do that loop over and over and over again to continue to deliver value. Like, you got to realize, like, it's your customer's money. It's not your money. The best way to have your customer say, yep, have my money, is let me solve a problem for you. And so if you constantly solve problems for them and solve it better than someone else can, then you can build a successful business.
Sounds like this was a cross-functional effort where it wasn't a like vertically integrated function to one of the bodies like product management or customer success. How did you guys operate? Did you report to the CEO? Because we created a version of this at PadSplit and had amazing success with
I remember.
cross-functional teams. We called them pods,
Yep.
and we basically asked a cross-functional group of individuals, and they had full autonomy to solve certain problems. One of those problems was demand-side growth, right? And we put a product manager in there and a marketer in there, user researcher, a bunch of engineers. It was an amazing experience seeing that type of cross-functional team flourish. What you just told me reminded me of that. Tell us a little bit more about Huggers at Full Story.
Your design has to match the stage of business, right? So I joined Full Story, I think right before Series A. There was 15 of us and 2 Huggers, and we reported directly to the COO. And at that stage, very intimate group, and we said like the customer's at the center of everything we do. Hugging is going to be at the center of that, and then Hugging is going to like sort of like do things to like influence from the inside out, right? With the customer at the core. Our direct report was the COO and president, but really we were empowered to sort of define the functions necessary to ensure that empathy was like ingrained in our product, ingrained in our operations. And so to do that, you had to hire people who could, I would say were above the role, had a set of skills and ability to navigate from the details to the big picture and ability to influence and communicate, be these sort of like multifaceted, sort of fluid individuals, but still with a bent for action and outcomes. And so, we hired people who, like myself, just came from Bridgewater. Jacqueline, who joined me, was like 10-year in account management and operations. And so we can operate as very independently, but still get a lot of things done and build and influence through thinking, through communication. That worked through Series B. And then we realized as we matured as a company, okay, we have to now start adding some structure to this, right? Because the world we're operating in is more complex. And so the fluidity is helpful, but sometimes it gets in the way of just running the machine. We split into proactive and to reactive first. So we said there's a set of proactive work we're going to do to build empathy with our customer, and then a set of reactive work we're going to do down the life cycle a little bit to solve problems for them, right? So you can think about reactive being like support and support engineering and managing escalations, and then the proactive work on the research, customer success side, community building. We took that split and then further on in Series B and split that into 4 defined functions, right? Product management, customer support, customer success, and then user research and community. Because your stakeholders internally need to know and need to have clarity into who's doing what. And the team needed to get bigger. And so as the team grew, we needed to have more defined roles with the same outcome of that empathy, but more definition inside to empower people to do work, right? This single cell that was very flexible to this more defined cell that's split into distinct functions as the business matured.
One thing that you said highly resonates with me. The design, the structure has to match the face of the company.
It does.
And early on, you can't really put too much structure because you don't even know what it needs to be, what it's supposed to be. And if you do, then you choke it. But then if you keep that flexible structures for too long, then as you grow, the business starts to struggle as well. I'm curious to hear your transition and your thinking into Saltbox from there, because Full Story is still today one of the most successful software companies that came out of the Atlanta ecosystem.
Correct.
You were there early on, and you decided to leave before you fully vested.
Jumped off a rocket ship to go ahead and maybe try to build another one.
That has to be hard, right? You are there at a rocket ship, at a unicorn, one of the rare ones from the Atlanta ecosystem, and you get this other opportunity. Tell us a little bit more about that transition and your thinking as a co-founder.
The thing that drives me the most is getting as close to the customer as possible. I put my full self into solving problems. One of my challenges as I've learned to mature is sort of putting my full self in, but not in an unhealthy way. Moving from Bridgewater, which is very macro and conceptual, full story, which says, okay, we're going to make the internet better, and we're going to like embed empathy into our operations. But you still have this digital divide between you and your customer. And now at Saltbox, we literally live with our customers. We're saying we're going to build a home for you, and you're going to come into our business, and we're going to be there with you every day. And that's one of the things that drove me. My co-founder, Tyler, and CEO, known him for 20-something years. We went to college together. Greatest university known to man, University of Virginia. And I think December of 2018 is when he said, I have this idea. And, we saw the macro potential of, the growing digitization of retail and hence e-commerce growth. But we saw that it was creating a really big problem where all these entrepreneurs did not have what they needed to be successful. And the fail rate was higher than it should be for starting e-commerce businesses, right? Very easy to open a store on Shopify, very easy to take payments on Stripe, but managing the physical side was way too hard. And we said, there has to be a way to systematically solve this problem. And so we said, why don't we just go solve it? The one way to solve it is first build a home for them. We call it purpose-built space. So think about all the life cycle of an e-commerce business. And then can we bring as many of those resources that you need along the life cycle into one physical space? And when I started playing through it, I was like, man, that is beautiful. It's hard. Someone hasn't done it and they haven't done it because it's hard. Physical work is like, it's so opposite of digital. But if you do it well and you can do it at scale, you have a true meaningful impact, not just on the lives of these individuals, but on the overall macro trend of e-commerce success. And so that's what drew me to it, right? It's like getting closer and closer to the customer and being able to directly impact their problems in a way that uses capitalism for good. Hey, I have the ability to buy things at scale, and then I can break them down to individual pieces and allow you to afford them. And in that process, make enough profit to continue to reinvest in the business.
What is your core hypothesis with Saltbox?
I'll say the easy answer, and then I'll expound on it. Logistics is fundamentally broken for SMBs. And then hence you need someone to come in and disrupt that design and rebuild logistics solutions that fit the needs of SMB and e-commerce merchants. So what does that actually mean, right? So if you think about Amazon, you think about Walmart, like logistics is built for them, right? UPS and FedEx and the Postal Service, right? Really great at, if you have all the money in the world and you can like build your own trucks or build your own technology, you can figure out how the system works for you and bend it to your will. But if you are, a $100,000 business just getting started operating out of your house, you're a $500,000 business starting to scale, really have some traction, you have working capital constraints, you have time constraints, you have size constraints, right? And so the big guys don't think about you, right? And they said, hey, just take what I have available and make it work for you, right? This is very similar to how Flexport thought about the freight business, right? Hey, there's a way this old world needs to be disrupted to be able to make it more accessible and approachable, and then hence lead to better outcomes for smaller businesses. And so we said, let's do that same thing for e-commerce merchants on the logistics side, right? From everything from how do you receive your raw materials, manage your inventory, and then ensure it gets out on time to the right carriers. And so like everything about our business is understanding from the e-commerce merchant, what do they need to like be operationally excellent? And then how can we use our physical spaces, our operation knowledge, and then our own technology to solve the problem for them?
Atlanta is a major logistics capital,
Yes.
talent density, operations density. Have you guys benefited from building a logistics company, startup in Atlanta?
So one of the ways we have, to your point, is one of our third co-founder, Paul, Georgia Tech engineer, UPS, and then went to UPS and worked in sort of their supply chain and logistics world, and then stayed here and built an e-commerce logistics company. The third of us sort of built a 20-year career in Atlanta, understanding this logistics world. Being in Atlanta and having a co-founder who understood that and was able to be so impactful, especially as we started this world of being able to like understand, okay, what does a warehouse need to look like? What are the day-to-day operations? What can they look like? How do we then take what UPS has done, but really diagnose it to work for an SMB? That was great. To your point is there's access to whoever we need. So we built great relationship with UPS, right? Built great relationship with Stored, another unicorn founded in Atlanta who came out of Georgia Tech. Great relationships with the rail system and understanding how that works, right? You have the Delta Airport, so you have both Delta, the operation and logistics, but you also have the busiest, most efficient airport in the world to get in and out of Atlanta. So all that from a macro perspective has been very helpful to sort of help us run this business and be able to scale it.
D2C went through a major boom after COVID. There was a tremendous increase in really number of operators and also major companies getting into D2C as well. Over the last 2 years, a lot of major D2C companies struggled as well. How has that transition been supporting SMB D2C businesses?
Yeah, we had this natural curve pre-COVID of adoption of retail activity to digital, right? So we were somewhere around just under 20%, and we were forecasting to be about today 25%. And then that curve, the inflection point of that curve just woof, in 2020. And that was great for attention, great for eyeballs, lots of activity around D2C. What wasn't great for some of these companies was money was cheap, and some of them were overvalued, or some of them built, I would call, unsustainable operations because money was cheap, right? And some of it worked because there was lots of consumer confidence, and so consumers were just buying things really quickly. They had extra cash. They were often just buying things because they were bored and were at home, and so you were just like changing some short-term behavior because you were stuck at home. And then we corrected. Both money got more expensive. People started traveling more. But then also what happened is the cost to operate became real, right? Labor costs went up, shipping costs went up, warehouse costs went up. And so the assumptions that a lot of companies built their financial and operating models on changed for them. That led to reassessing business models. That led to lower valuations for the ones that raised on venture terms. That led to sort of people having to lay off individuals because it was too expensive to afford them. That led to people having to think about other space to operate because industrial space became very expensive. The biggest impact on the negative side was really uncertainty on consumer sentiment, and then hence understanding for the SMB, right, which is always hard for them to be able to forecast sales and then manage how much inventory do I buy, what's the right price, and then how do I optimize my working capital. When consumer sentiment changes, the SMB feels the brunt of that because they have the least flexibility to be wrong about something. So we saw this huge wave, the nerdy term be like a sinusoidal curve, but really just this high
Volatility.
Very high volatility for the SMB. And some of them were just taken off because they just figured it out. And others were like, what are you talking about? Last month it worked. This month it's not working. And so, and it's like, what is going on? Because we live with them, we feel that empathy every day. And so we know we can solve, right? We can try to solve things for them that said, okay, great. How can I change the dynamics of how you buy things in the operation space to reduce your working capital constraints? So can I give you better terms? Can I help you buy it in smaller increments? Can I form partnerships where collectively we can reduce some of the cost of things? We were inspired by that. But what we really realized is we can reduce the cost of shipping for these companies. And so we said, let's figure out how do we take what we can control, the ability to aggregate packages, the ability to attract SMBs, the ability to sort of have big boy conversations with the large carriers, but then also connect with emerging carriers and reduce the cost to ship for these merchants. And so the change in the market inspired us to go ahead and build a new product that we're launching next month, which said, if we can reduce your shipping costs and give you better options with the same level of output as if you went to a UPS store directly to FedEx, we're solving a real problem for the SMB.
Another volatility I see in your space is what's happening in the commercial real estate. I mean, you could argue that it can be a tailwind for you guys because there's a ton of opportunity due to where the market is. You could also argue that it's a headwind. Where do you see it playing out for Saltbox, and how do you guys maneuver major headwinds both what's happening in D2C and also what's happening in commercial real estate?
If you break down commercial real estate, you have pure retail space, you have this office product, and then you have industrial. Industrial and office kind of have this inverse relationship over the past 3 years. right? Where infill space and logistics enabled space became so valuable as behavior change was happening. And then, you had the Walmarts and the Amazons and whatever, like being very aggressive for space and wanting to get product closer to the customer. Whereas people weren't going to the office very much. And so office space, people just kind of sitting there dead. And so the impact on us is both a headwind and a tailwind. People are seeing the value of like sort of infill logistics space. What we're doing is even more valuable than it was previously. Right. However, there's more competition for the space we want. Right. And so we have to figure out how to be more creative. Right. We're not building more infill industrial space very much right now. And if you do, it costs so much. And so there's like creative conversions of space. There are, okay, maybe I would take a class C building as opposed to a class B building and have to spend more CapEx on it. And then for us, given a flexible business model, how would we change the design of our space or design of our operations to use different spaces, but still have the same outcome, which is logistics enablement for the SMB, and then consistency and being able to connect with all the carriers in our buildings. And so we are navigating that push and pull of the space is even more valuable, but it's now also there's more and more people fighting for it, or it's more expensive. And so it just forced us to be creative with our operations and creative with our revenue potential to be able to sort of compete for space.
The reason why I reached out to you was talking about really hiring practices and building teams. At its core, startups are a team sport, and you really need the best people possible on your side to beat the odds. So you're building something that somebody never did before, and by definition, the odds are against you. And it's in my opinion, an underexplored topic. As a co-founder, what are your strongly held beliefs about hiring and building teams?
I think about just hiring and talent in general with like using a simple VAS framework, right? Values, abilities, and skills. And I use that because, to your point, my goal is to find the best people for what we're trying to accomplish. Adding those two together, then I have to say, okay, what are my core values, right? And because I want people who will like push, like who understand and want to operate a same way, right? Not just trying to build a cult. You're not trying to do that. What you're trying to say is this is going to be hard. This is going to be dynamic. If we can at our core agree how we want to operate together, then we have the best chance to win. And then I say, okay, well, what's my mission here? I might not know literally what I need to do 3 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months ago, but if I have a clear mission, I can attract people with that mission. And so if you like these values and then you have abilities aligned to this mission, then great. Then that's a good pool to fish from to find awesome people. There's certain skills you have and certain skills you can develop, but they happen at a faster pace. Skill development can happen at a faster pace if you have the right abilities and people align to the right values. And so I don't discount them, but I do put them third in that process, right? Unless you have very specific roles, right? I'm not going to take a random accountant trying to make them an engineer. That doesn't make sense. Well, what I will say is, okay, well, I need to solve go-to-market, right? Okay, well, if you believe in our mission, you have the abilities to be a quantitative thinker. You can be creative. You can sort of like hold multiple ideas in your head and sort of like do a risk analysis. Okay, great. And then you understand this customer base. You can be in go-to-market. You don't have to be a marketing specialist. You don't have to be a digital manager, whatever it is. You can be on the go-to-market team because you have some of the core abilities that we would need to go ahead and do that, because we're just at this moment trying to figure it out. And so to that point, then I kind of align my emphasis on skills to the stage of business, right? Okay, like what do we really need right now, and what things can someone learn if they have the core abilities? And and so like at the earliest stage, I say, okay, I just want people who want to help, who are going to be here to figure it out. And they have abilities of bias for action, a little bit of scrappiness, a balance of quantitative and qualitative skills. And then we can go ahead and figure out the right skills to do this. And then as you start to mature, right, then you have a bit more of this specialization, a bit more of the structure. Then you add in the skills a bit more to then say, okay, well, I now know what this is. Okay, great. I need an SME in this space because that's going to be a tentpole of my business. So now let me like really prioritize skills in the VAS framework to go ahead and have somebody like do this thing day in and day out. And that's going to match what they want in their life, because they're saying, yes, I am an SME and I want to become an industry expert in this. Great. I'm going to give you ability to do that.
How do you manage basically talent when it comes to not coping up with the how quickly the stage of the company is changing. The job can change on you in less than 6 months.
Correct.
You might have a job today, and 6 months later, company's completely in a different space, and you need to get into a completely different headspace. And that's a tremendous challenge for a lot of people.
A lot of
How
people.
do you help your teams to deal with that speed of change?
I would say that that's been one of the hardest struggles, especially given the past 5 years and how dynamic the world has been. I learned a little bit of this at Full Story. It starts with being clear upfront, right? And just letting people know, what is it like to work here? And then sometimes a trick my COO used to use is if you get close to the end of the hiring process, I'm going to invert it. And I'm going to try to convince you why you shouldn't come. And I want to hear how you're thinking about some of the challenges. And then I want to A, how does your brain work when hearing these challenges? But B, then do you still say, no, I still want this? Are you emotionally and mentally in before you sign the dotted line? And I try to look for that signal as much as possible in the hiring process, because then that tells me, okay, good. We have a foundation to be able to work through the dynamic things when they come up. But if I don't see that, I'm going to be so nervous about when changes happen, how you're going to react. Are you going to persevere through them, right? So looking for a little bit of that perseverance and a little bit of that want to in the hiring process. If you don't find that in the hiring process, it's going to be a crapshoot if you're going to have it when things dynamically change.
I love it, and I've done a similar version of that. At all the early stage startups I worked at, where I would try to scare people off.
Yes.
Because there is this sort of glorified perception of startups from outside. It's this sort of a status symbol, and maybe the get rich quick scheme from outside, right? The odds are you're not going to get rich, right? Because your options will be worth nothing. I would tell people that working at early stage startups is like building a plane while you're flying it and the jet is on fire, right? It's a dumpster fire at
Yeah.
80% of the time. And that's the honest reality. And as long as you understand what you're signing up for and you're willing to sign up for that shitstorm,
Yep.
yeah, please come on board, as long as the values, abilities, and skills align.
Exactly. Yeah. I will add one piece of context to that. That is right. I think there's almost three buckets of people. There's those who've never worked at a startup before, right? There's those who love early stage and habitual, and then those who are jaded by startups. I guess I use that to color and think about who this person is and what they're bringing to the table when looking for that perseverance and looking for that flexibility. For the one who's never worked at a startup before, do they challenge premises and paradigms, or do they just fully accept them? Did they get in a little bit in trouble at their companies before because they wanted to do things more creatively and faster, and they felt stuck and frustrated by it? Or were they comfortable? And if they were comfortable, I'm like, I don't want you right now, because this isn't about being comfortable. For the habitual early stage person, it's very attractive. But I'm like, okay, are you just attracted to fires, or do you solve them, right? Do you navigate well and solve them? And then want to build systems? I'm drawn to fires, right? That's why, I just am doing this over and over again. And so I see the risk of that, of oh man, you just love how crazy this is, but are you going to help me get through it? And then for the jaded person, I'm like, do you still have the energy to do this? You're talented and skilled, but are you really want to do this again? Or are you kind of just man, is this one going to work out? I don't know. And so that's where this wisdom of making a bunch of mistakes over the past years, I've been able to use some of this context to help me look for that signal and understand the signal that I'm getting in the hiring process.
For the first bucket, never worked at startup bucket, what is your take on hiring based on pedigree and brand names on resume?
As a Northeastern person who I went to one of those elite private schools, and then I actually chose to not go to an Ivy. That sounds weird to say, but chose not to go to an Ivy and leave and go to a public school in the South, and then get back to Bridgewater where it's all pedigree. Conceptually, your floor is higher. Conceptually, it's almost like a bad filter. You have these rose-colored glasses because man, they went to Wharton and then did iBanking. And so coming from that world, I'm able to like just be like, okay, this is all crap. Let me understand what you really can do, you know? And so sometimes I do a balance of this qualitative exercise where I'm going to make you uncomfortable in the interview and see what you can do about it, right? So, you know, I also stole this a little bit from a combination of Bridgewater and my old COO. I don't know if you knew Bruce Johnson at Full Story.
No.
Bruce, great thinker. It taught me a lot, challenged how I thought a lot. But I want to make you uncomfortable in the interview process to see how your brain works, right? And then I want to give you a white space exercise timed and then see what you can do with it, right? I don't want to see a MECE framework. I want to see you find the root of the problem and build something quickly. Because I was kind of one of those people, right? You know, Full Story took a chance on me. Bridgewater is a good place to think creatively while also being around people who are, you know, Rhodes Scholars and Harvard and MIT. Full Story is like, okay, great. It sounds like you're smart. Can you actually work at a startup? And so make you uncomfortable and see what you really have in your core. And then the thing I would do is, I think the first 30 to 90 days with those people to rebuild their muscles to like operate at a startup are key. Ever been on a sports team or a fraternity? And like, I'm going to break you down and build you back up. That's kind of like what I see for those people coming into a startup.
For early stage startups, just smart doesn't cut it. If you can't deal with getting punched on the face over and over again and get back up again, it doesn't matter how smart you are.
Correct.
I have nothing against really great people with amazing backgrounds. In my previous life, worked at Amazon. Trend that I see is that what made me successful at Amazon, what made you successful at Bridgewater, does not really have parallels into early stage startup work that you do.
Not directly at all. The thing that was good about Bridgewater that actually really helped me was the speed with which we had to think about problems while also having the depth of understanding. That sort of muscle I built over a couple of years there was helpful at Full Story in terms of like being comfortable with speed. What I need to do is get signal quickly, right? I need to get smarter over time, but I can't waste my time trying to like boil the ocean to make the decision. I have to like have this balance of intuition and hypothesis testing, and then quickly test that thing and keep going. And so if there are people who come from worlds where like you have to operate quickly, especially in a room, on a whiteboard, whatever it is, then I think, okay, there's something here we can work with to help you get comfortable in a startup.
What is your contrarian take on hiring that most would disagree with?
Yeah, so one is I think a founder should be involved in every hire, probably through the first couple hundred. Hey man, like at the end of the day, there are like only a few people who see the whole big picture and like really understand the core of this thing. And I want that to be part of the hiring process. And so the more you can keep the core in the hiring process, I think then you will have better outcomes. I think two, there's a difference between hiring managers and people managers. Too many times a people manager becomes a hiring manager. I was like, no, there's like literally a higher bar for a hiring manager. And so just because you're going to manage this person does not mean you're making a decision about if they're coming. You're obviously involved in the process. You're a key stakeholder, but a hiring manager is such a higher bar that like I want as few people as possible to have that bar so that like we can like keep talent as good as possible.
Amazon had it. They called them bar raisers. And the hiring methodology was that the new person coming into the team has to be better than at least 50% of the existing team. Bar raisers' job was to keep that bar high and not let the hiring manager make a desperate decision, because, you know, one of the most difficult things that I've seen at Amazon was that you are growing like gangbusters and you are desperate to fill the seats, but the bar raisers are telling you that no, this person is not better than the 50% of the team that we have in place.
Yeah. I've always thought about, you know, would I ever want to run a 10,000, 50,000 person company? And I get scared of that in the sense that when you're small, you have the ability to be so picky because like you're only looking for 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 people. I'm looking for 100 people a month to join my company. It is you can imagine how hard it feels to keep the bar high, you know, and then all these different layers to navigate. And so like, okay, like how do you build systems to like, and memes and ways of like holding people accountable to be able to then like keep the bar high? It's really hard.
Yep. And the other thing that impressed me at Amazon, and I've struggled to build a version of it at the startups that I worked at, was the rigor that went into the hiring process.
Yeah.
Just to be on the hiring panel, hiring loop, you had to go through a series of training to understand what it means to become not just a hiring manager, but like to be one of the people in that hiring loop.
Correct.
And that's something that I struggled with at the startups that I worked at, because you don't have a whole lot of structure on anything, let alone the hiring process. What have you learned from Bridgewater that you to this day find helpful while you're building Saltbox?
I'll talk on the positive side. There's a framework called that's around design. Ray used the term design. Thinking machines and design for the outcomes. And so there's a GMO framework: goals, machine, outcome. Right. So you have your goals, and then you have your outcomes, and then in between is the machine to get it done. I use that framework very often, and I find it comforting, but then also empowering, because then you can like talk about the system we're trying to build and have others understand it and then perpetuate from there, right? My machine is designed for outcomes, right? There's a feedback loop, obviously, between my goals and my outcomes. And so the thing that helps me with that feedback loop is who are the people and how am I designing their work to try to get to my outcomes? And then knowing that like I'm likely wrong the first time I design it, but I'm going to think about this as a design, and then I'm going to like or the right people, and constantly tune that machine until my outcomes are more predictable and lower variance performance to help me achieve my goals. And so like every time we're thinking about, okay, like, is this, why is this not working? My first instinct sometimes is like, okay, you can just go to the people, but you also have to think about what are you asking them to do, right? And have you assessed, is that the right combination of what we're asking them to do and how we're asking them to operate with their skills and abilities? That design is on the manager, right? And then the people is also on the manager in terms of how you hire them. But if you're setting them up correctly, that is on you as the senior person. And then you can't just go ahead and fire somebody because they're not performing. You have to ask yourself, am I setting them up for success as much as possible? If I think I hired correctly, my first instinct needs to be, am I getting the most out of them? And am I putting them in a position to be their best selves? And if I'm not, that's my fault, not their fault.
When your context is fire everywhere, how do you deal with that? Meaning at Bridgewater, you have the luxury to maybe train people or just put them somewhere else because it's a big machine and you have room for mistakes. At early stage, you are literally grasping for air and fighting for your survival every day. Yeah. How do you deal with not a bad hire, but a bad placement? The person is good, but you hired them for the wrong role, or you did not set them up for success.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
It is net worse to have someone struggling in a role than to not have them at all. It is net worse, right? And okay, if that is a truism, okay, now then you have things you can do with that, obviously. But knowing that you can rely on the fact that, like, worst case scenario, a good outcome is still like they're just not doing that job, and I will deal with the cultural problems of it. And oftentimes the cultural issues that I'm seeing are stemming from people lacking clarity and feeling confident in their roles. And so even though I'm afraid of them sometimes, if I know I solve that problem, over time it will be better. Now, if I fall into a pattern of I'm always doing that, then I've built a company that doesn't hire well at all. And then that's my problem. But I can't be afraid of that to actually achieve my goals. And so the first thing I do, right, is try to be in sync with the senior leadership team and how we want to approach these people and bring those things to us as early as possible. Just highlight those problems. Be like, hey, person X is monthly check-ins just not performing well, and this is what I'm doing about it. So you need signal early. And I think if you have a culture of getting signal early, that has great downstream outcomes, because that means you're proactively managing things and you're not on your heels about it. And then I can trust my senior managers if they're bringing the problems to me early and I'm just empowering them to solve it. 2 dots is a line, 3 dots is a trend. right? I'm going to look for that trend and then quickly realize, like, you have to, like, my goal is quickly realize there's a trend. If I don't take action once I notice the trend, then I'm failing my leadership team about something to do about it. If I overreact, then I might not understand enough. So the moment you have to figure out there's a trend there, then you have to take action.
Has your thinking evolved over time when it comes to hiring and building teams as an early stage employee? Right? You were one of first 15 at a rocket ship versus a co-founder.
The thing that I realized that most people don't is, what bias are you bringing to the table that is clouding your judgment? You know, and sometimes that bias actually happens in how that person's interacting with you, right? Whether it is you have something similar in common, and so then there's like that you're comfortable, or whether you're like, I'm intimidating this person, and I'm not seeing their best self. And so the thing we're trying to do better is structure, you know, the 3 or 4 people who are involved in the hiring process, have some complementary, look for the complements to like hold us accountable to our biases. No, because you know that they're there. You just might not be able to always see them. And then be okay with, there's a little bit of tension in, you want to come to agreement on the hiring. Like, I want all 4 thumbs up, but I want there to be a little bit of like, I saw this, but I didn't see that. Okay, great. Let's talk about that. And if I get that, then at least I know people are looking at things in ways I'm not looking at it. And then we can be eyes wide open when making an offer and setting that person up for success.
I love it. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for making the time. I've learned a lot from you today, Maxwell.
This is great, man. I've just learned from all the mistakes I've made. So I'm happy to share those over time.